One thing is certain, we will never create a drawing by simply free-picking points on screen. If we want to draft accurately, we'll need to know how to use AutoCAD's coordinate system to lock onto our geometry. I'm going to open a drawing. We're going to go up to our Open icon, and we're going to come down to our Exercise Files folder. We'll go into Chapter 5, and I'm going to open up the number 2 drawing using O-Snaps. So I'll highlight that guy and click Open to bring him up on screen. When I look at this drawing, I can see a finished version on the right and an almost finished version on the left. Our job throughout this session is to go through and finish each of the drawings. Let's look at this guy first. If I want to finish this star shape, I'm going to launch my line command, and it would be real nice if I knew what the coordinate of the end of that line was. Now, I could look down in the lower left-hand corner of my screen. I could check out the status bar, but I would only be guessing, because as I move around, those numbers change. So I need to know what the coordinate is, but you know what? AutoCAD has a tool that'll find that coordinate for me. That tool is called an object snap. So I'm going to hit my escape key to cancel out of the line command, and let's bring up the object snap toolbar on our screen. I'm going to come over and right-click on any existing tool, and in the list of toolbars, I'm going to come down to Object Snap. Let me click on this guy to turn him on. He pops up right in the middle of our screen. He's going to be important for this session, so I'm going to keep him right in the middle. I'm going to click, hold, and drag, and I'll move him right up to here. I can use object snaps to lock onto my geometry. Let's start by looking at the endpoint object snap. I'm going to launch my line command. Now I would like to start my line from the end point of this line. If I want to do that, AutoCAD's asking me to specify first point. I'm going to come up, click my endpoint object snap, and now if we look at the command line, AutoCAD is looking for an endpoint. So as I move my cursor close to this line, notice AutoCAD brings up a little icon, tells me it's going to find the endpoint. If I left click, AutoCAD just locked onto that location. Now I can go to my next point. I'm going to come up and select endpoint again. I want to lock onto the endpoint right here. Now that I'm done, I'm going to hit my escape key. Let's take and finish this guy up. I'm going to right click to go right back into the line command. AutoCAD says, where's your first point? Well, I'm going to come up. We're going to use an object snap. I'm going to say the endpoint, and I'm going to hover by this line. Notice how far away from that endpoint I can be and still grab that endpoint. So long as I'm 50% of the way to one side, I can grab the endpoint. Notice, as I get close to the other side, AutoCAD's going to find the other endpoint. The thing I'm trying to stress is you don't have to be right on it to grab it. Okay, so I can grab the endpoint from right here. Let me just left-click. AutoCAD found it. Where do I want to go to? I'm going to come up and click my endpoint object snap again, and I'll grab the endpoint right here. Let me hit escape. That is the endpoint object snap. It allows us to lock onto the endpoints of our geometry. Let's look at another one. I'm going to pan this geometry up. Let's look at the center point object snap. Now the center point obviously allows us to snap to the center of our circles or our arcs. Let's replicate the geometry we see on the right. Once again, I'm going to launch my line command. I'll click line, and then I'm going to come over and I'm going to click this icon, represents my center object snap. Once again, if we look at the command line, AutoCAD's saying center of. If I want to grab a center object snap, we need to look at the X or the cursor on my screen as AutoCAD's eyeball. As I move the cursor on top of my geometry, notice as soon as the eyeball hits the arc, AutoCAD finds the center. At this point, when the eyeball hits the arc, I can left-click and AutoCAD will find the center of that entity. Let me come up and grab another center object snap, and then we'll put our eyeball on this arc and click. Once again, we don't have to move our cursor all the way to the actual location of the object snap. Let me hit escape. And let's finish this guy up. I'm going to launch the line command. Where do I want to start? I want to start from the center of here, and I want to go to the center of here, and I want to go to the center of here. All right, let me hit escape to finish. That is the center point object snap. Let's pan this up. We have another object snap for midpoint. I'm going to use the midpoint object snap to replicate the geometry we see on the right. I'm going to launch my line command. This time we're going to come up and we're going to click this icon. This icon represents midpoint. Don't forget the little tooltip that pops up. Sometimes it may take a little while before you remember what each one of these little cryptic symbols means. Midpoint's right here. Let me click that. AutoCAD says midpoint of what? As I bring my cursor down and put the eyeball on the entity, notice AutoCAD brings up a little symbol that represents midpoint. Each of the object snaps has a different symbol. Midpoint happens to be a triangle. So I'll bring my cursor down and touch the line, left click to grab the midpoint, And where do I want to go? I want to go to the midpoint right here. Let me hit escape and we'll finish this guy up. We'll go right back into the line command, and I want to go from the midpoint of the left side to the midpoint of the right. Let me hit escape to get out of the command. That is the midpoint object snap. Let's pan up. We've got one for intersection. Intersection will allow us to snap to the intersection of existing line work. Let's replicate this geometry. I'm going to do it with circles. So I'm going to launch my circle command. Where would I like the center point of my circle to be? I'm going to come up to my intersection object snap and click. I want to place my circle to the intersection right here. Now with the intersection object snap, you do have to be pretty close to the intersection because AutoCAD needs to see both lines. So let me left click. AutoCAD found the intersection. Now, I don't need to know what the radius is. You may be thinking, well, how is he going to know what radius to put in there? I'm just going to use another intersection. If I click intersection, I can grab the intersection of this circle and the line. Remember, we don't have to enter a radius or a diameter for a circle. We can pick a point on screen as well. All right, let's finish it up. I'm going to go right back to the circle command. So let me right click, repeat circle. And this time we're going to have to mix the object snaps up just a little bit. I'm going to use endpoint first, endpoint of here to the intersection right there. Last one. Right click, repeat circle, and I want to go from the endpoint here to the intersection right there. Using object snaps is the only way to create accurate geometry, because if I'm using an object snap, I know that I'm locking onto my coordinate with an accuracy of 14 spaces to the right of the decimal. Let me pan this up. I've got a couple more I'd like to look at. We're going to look at the quadrant object snap. Quadrant allows us to snap to the north, south, east, or west areas of a circle or an arc. If I left click on this circle, notice I get little blue squares. Those pop up at the quadrant locations. Let me hit escape to deselect the circle, and let's finish our basketball. I'm going to do this with the line command. So we'll come up and launch line. I want to draw a line from the quadrant. That quadrant icon is right here. Snap to quadrant. If I put AutoCAD's eye on the arc, notice I can find the quadrant at the top. If I move close to the edge, I could find the quadrant over here. Whichever one I happen to be closest to is what AutoCAD's going to grab. Let me click to grab this object snap. We'll go to the quadrant down here. I'll hit escape to get out of the command, and we'll finish this gap. I'm going to right click, go right back into the line command. I want to draw that line from the quadrant of the left side to the quadrant of the right. Let me hit escape to finish. I'm going to pan this guy up. We've got two more object snaps I want to look at. This one is tangent. It's important to know how to use the tangent object snap. Tangent will allow us to create geometry that is tangent to an arc. I'm going to replicate this geometry using the line command. So let me launch line. Where do I want to start my line? I'm going to come up and grab the tangent object snap. As I put AutoCAD's eye on the arc, notice the symbol's different for tangent. If I click, as I pull away, notice the line segment that I'm creating was always going to maintain its tangency to that arc. So I'm starting from that point. Where do I want to go to? I want to go to a point tangent to this arc. And when I click, I get my line. Let me hit escape to cancel out, and we'll finish this guy up. I'm going to right click, repeat line. I want to start from a point tangent to this arc, and I want to go to a point. We'll click tangent to this arc. There we go. Let me hit escape. Let me pan this up. We'll do the last one, perpendicular. Perpendicular will allow us to create geometry that is perpendicular to other geometry. I'm going to finish this guy using the line command. So I'm going to come over and launch line. Specify first point. This time we're going to mix the object snaps up just a little bit. I want to start from the end point here. I also could have chosen intersection if I wished. And I want to go to a point perpendicular. Here's my perpendicular object snap. I'll click this guy. And when I put AutoCAD's eye on that line, notice no matter where I click on this line, AutoCAD's going to find the perpendicular location. So let me left click to find that. I'll hit escape. And we'll do one more. I want to create a line from the intersection here. And I want to draw that perpendicular to this line. Let me left click to grab that snap. And I'll hit escape to get out of the command. Now, object snaps are very valuable. We're going to be using these frequently from this point on. So I'm going to dock this toolbar to my interface. And I'm going to dock this to the right side. You may be wondering, why don't you dock it to the left where all the other toolbars are? I do that for a reason, because sometimes the Object Snap icons tend to look similar to some of the draw icons. We can see that the line icon happens to look very similar to endpoint, and the circle icon happens to look very similar to center point. So if I take and dock this toolbar to the right side, we can always remember that the Object Snaps are to the right and the draw tools are to the left. From this moment on, we will always use Object Snaps as we draft. Using Object Snaps is the only way to guarantee that we are creating accurate geometry.